So today's guest is Tehilla Aloni, who is an extrasensory business consultant and homeopath, as well as being a former national judo champion in Israel 7 years running. So welcome to the show.
Hi, Jeevan. Thanks for having me. Pleased to be here.
Absolutely. We obviously had a chat off air before, didn't we, about a number of things. So if you would just talk about your business, your situation and where it started from. So you obviously were a kid and you were doing judo. How did that develop you into the person you are today?
Ooh, well, I remember I actually started doing judo at the age of 5. And I was doing judo from the age of 5 to the age of 18, which was like the most important, starting portion of my life. And I think that was, a crucial stage in my development. First of all, judo is an individual sport, so which is very different from team sports, as I discovered later on. And you learn a lot. You learn how to depend on yourself. You learn the power of perseverance. You learn about the learning curve, and you learn basically it's also a form of survival. It's a martial art at the end of the day. And I also was 7 years running. I was a national judo champion. I was on the Israeli judo team. But I was very selfish because I kept on thinking about my success and how I'm going to win and how I'm going to maintain my title. And also as being part of the national judo team, I used to be sent off to training camps abroad, which was lovely. I used to enjoy that a lot. And competitions abroad. And I also had to fight for my place, because if there was one place, for judo is also divided into weight categories. So there was one person who was going to go to the training camp in Belgium, and I had to fight my teammates for that one place to go to that training camp, for example. So it made me a very selfish person. And later, among other things, obviously it brought, lots of good and positive character traits. But I think all individual sports at the end of the day, it's all about you and you being number one. And like we spoke about, it's a zero-sum game, because there's always a winner and a loser. And at some point at the age of 18, I was already drafted to the Israeli army. Everyone has to go to the army here in Israel, men and women. And I actually had what the army does, because if you're an excellent athlete, they let you train, they let you keep on training during your service. So I had received that status. And I was in the army. I was like an assistant librarian. It's like the most meaningless job. I used to come into the army. I used to go, literally, I remember my record time was going in and out of the, of the office within 17 minutes. What I used to do, I used to go, it was like the Army Navy. It was the Navy library. And I had to update what magazines had arrived on the computer. So my record was, after 70 minutes, I managed to update all the magazines for the day. And I went back to training because I used to train twice a day. But at some point, I injured my knee. I had injured my knee, for the first time, when I was younger, and I had to do a surgery, ACL, one of the ligaments. And then I injured my knee again, the other knee. And that's when I decided that it was time I couldn't quit. I couldn't go on. And I decided I wanted to do something more meaningful in the army. And I became a commander, a boot camp commander for new recruits from disadvantaged backgrounds. What the army actually does, the IDF, it takes youth from difficult backgrounds, and it actually gives them a second chance. It's it's actually a service for society, and it's a special program where they have like a minimal freedom. So if you would normally you tell soldiers that they have 10 minutes to get dressed and shave and be ready, but or 5 minutes to go from here to the canteen. But with these new recruits, the program is built that they have minimal independence. So during the first few weeks, instead of giving them 5 minutes to go to the canteen, you give them 15 seconds to go from this tree to the next tree. And you'd start mobilizing them, and as they make these, you have like more obtainable goals. As they reach their objectives, you give them more and more freedom. And at the end of the 8-week program, for instance, you can give them 5 minutes and they'll reach the canteen. If you would, you would start the program by giving them 5 minutes to the canteen, you arrive at the canteen after 5 minutes, and all the soldiers would be all over the base. No one would actually go there. No one would appear in the canteen. So you build their independence slowly, and they actually go through this whole, process where they become, most of them, not quite a large percentage of them do what we used to say, straighten out and manage to become soldiers and be part of the system, because the military system is very, is not very flexible. But as a commander of such recruits, you have to be completely selfless. First of all, they're very difficult, and obviously they think that you're against them, and it's very thankless. So I had to go from I had to do a very big switch from going from being someone who's very selfish and focused on my own success to someone who's completely there for a whole group of soldiers who basically hate me, usually to begin with for the first few weeks, until I actually gain their trust and they see that I'm actually for them. So that was another stage in my development.
So
I'd say.
So you've gone from being a national judo champion that has been traveling abroad, representing the country. As you said, I think there's a fine line, isn't there, between being selfish and ambitious? Because to be ambitious, you need to sometimes be selfish. And you see this with football players. They're in a team sport, but some of the football players are very selfish in order to get their own goals, their own stats up. And now you are, well, at that point, you were a commander and you had to be very selfless. So there's two ends of the spectrum there, isn't there?
Exactly. And that's what managed actually, and that's how I managed to make the flip, because the army being such an inflexible system, you have no choice but to make the flip. You go from, taking care of your health and taking care of your own needs all the time, to sleeping 3.5 hours, a day, and having no breaks and being there for someone else. And that actually helps you make a quick transition. When you don't have much of a choice, that's usually when you make the change. People aren't very, in general, I find it's difficult to make a change, and you usually make a change when you have no choice.
Yeah.
So that actually forced me.
Yeah, there's generally two ways, isn't there? There's either desperation or inspiration to make you make a change. And generally, if it's desperation you're forced to, then you can make that change. But the thing with the army is that the purpose and focus of the army comes above everyone else. So if you don't feel good about something, but you have to do that, the focus of the army's task or objective is above you, if that makes sense. Whereas with judo,
exactly.
it's the result that's most important, and because it's you who controls that, you want to control every asset of the gripping, the movement, and try and get sometimes easier opponents so that you can get later stages. Did your mindset shift from a judoka to a commander in that respect of looking at small objectives versus the wider objective of the army, for example?
I tell you what, because once you're on the national team, so first of all, I like what you said about desperation and inspiration. That's an amazing way to look at it. It's just when you're part of the national team, it's like someone is going to represent Israel in that competition. It's either going to be you or it's going to be someone else. So you still, once you're serving you're representing a larger system, whether it's the country or the army, you still you're still an individual trying to maintain your individuality in front of a much bigger system that really it doesn't care about you that much. You're also a means to an end, and it's either you're going to be, either you're in or you're out. So I think that's the difference of being on a national team compared to just doing it as a hobby.
That's true. And the thing is, when you get to the higher level, so I did judo as well. Obviously, we spoke off air about this before. I did judo for a few years as a kid till from like 11 to 14. Got to green belt, stopped for 17 years, as you do. You know, you get to that age where you want to go out and meet girls and have drinks and stuff. So you tend to not be willing to sacrifice that for a wider objective. Got to age 30 and I thought, well, actually, I really enjoyed judo as a kid. I want to get back to do it. So I started up again. And since then, I've been doing okay, to be honest. Can you talk a bit about the high level side of judo in terms of the gripping side? Is it that you need to throw in every direction? What is it exactly that separates you at that level? Because at low level, it's get your hands on and sort of walk around with each other and see what happens. But if you watch high level judo, it's grip and go a lot of the time, isn't it?
Well, I think, also higher levels. I remember also one of the things that it's important to note that when I had always an Israeli judo coach, and at some point there were lots of Russian Jews came to Israel, and then I had a Russian judo coach, and it was a very different type of judo. And also, as Russians do, he had a more a broader approach. I remember he also had me do like math tests to see how quickly I think, like simple math tests, but lots of adding lots of numbers and how quickly I would do that. And it was a broader approach to training. So, and also judo in Russia is they do sambo, which is a kind of form of wrestling. So the Russian judo is more, it's less like the Japanese is more, I'd say the traditional style. It's a cleaner style, whereas the sambo and the Russian judo, it's more you kind of, you fold people up and you roll over and you don't really know where where it's coming from. I remember practicing like Russian judo moves and they didn't even have a name in the traditional sense.
Yeah.
And my sense of orientation, it was very difficult for me to orient myself because it was putting someone around my head and moving forward, and it was more difficult, but it was a different style.
Yeah.
And then I remember the coach, he'd draw like a cross, and then we started building a takui. The word takui is like your favorite technique, your favorite move.
Yeah.
And for each direction, I had a takui. For forward and left, a throw like that was ostogari, and like the poncionage on the left on the knees. So every direction, whatever direction the opponent would go, I had it was like a star, and I knew what move I would make depending on where the opponent goes. So and those were the moves that I would practice. That was my expertise, and I had that's I think that's the more professional approach to judo at the higher level.
So your four direction throws. So Ippon Seonaki was off the opposite grip.
The left, opposite grip.
And then you had Oso Tagari to the far corner. So you're right-handed player.
Yeah, to the far corner, and that then I used to like catching both sleeves and sort of pushing slowly the arm backwards.
Yeah. And
that was ostogari.
Yeah.
And then it was like ogeruma or something. Tayatoshi was like Tayatoshi, for instance, is I think there's some, we spoke about it earlier, that there's some judo moves that are more suitable for young people, but as you get older or more professional, then it's more difficult to do, and you don't do them anymore.
Yeah.
So like the marote seonage, I used to like as a child doing marote seonage is when you catch the lapel, right? Is that how you pronounce it? Yeah. And you turn around and you pull him. But then they told, then I was told that marote seonage is not good for older children. And then I had to do the ippon seonage, where you put the arm underneath the armpit and you throw forward. So it's less of an art, so to speak, when you become professional.
Yeah.
In a way, it's a different kind of order. It takes a different. It's much more functional and practical, I'd say, than when it becomes professional and competitive. The judo.
Yeah. What about the other far corner? What would you throw to that other corner?
Um,
Gary or something?
Ochigari, yeah,
Yeah, Gary.
Ochigari, with catching the leg at the same time. That was like
Yeah.
the Russian extra thing was when you do Ochigari and you actually fall on your knee and you catch the leg, and you bring it all the way to your shoulder. So it's like an Ochigari, like, but it's more like, cropping the leg.
Yeah.
That was the Russian take on that one.
But like you said though, I was saying to my friend the other day, I was like, I miss judo 2 years ago, 3 years ago when I started, when it was like I didn't overthink things. It would just go in, start ragging people around and get your arm around and throw them. Now, not that I'm at any level compared to what you are, but you have to then start thinking, well, what are my throws? What's the gripping strategies? Where do I need my hands? Where do I need to move them? And not that it gets more boring, but it takes away some of that um sort of love essence from it in some respects. But if you were to give me some advice as to how I can get to that next level, what would you say?
First of all, I want to say, what you were talking about. It's like about specialization. Like in everything, you get your niche. If you want to do anything good, you have to specialize and have your niche. And what happens is you practice so many times that it's automated. It's these, it's your brain becomes, these. You do it before you even think about it. That's the whole thing about reflex. Everything becomes like a reflex movement. I remember, like, years after I stopped judo, some man just jokingly sort of attacked me from the back, and I already just did the judo move, even though I hadn't done it for years. It's just part of the brain already functions that way, and it does. You do lose the joy. I can say I used to hate doing judo. I used to hate training. I hated training. I hated going to the gym, and because you had to do weight exercises, and I hated running most. I hate running. I hate monotonous sports.
Yeah, I hate running as well.
So I used to do it, and I used to hate it. I remember starting practice, looking at the clock and thinking, oh my God, another hour and a half, another 2.5 hours this is going to last. How will I do it? But I just loved winning so much. And I also loved going abroad, and I loved the whole social aspect of it. But I then realized that for that 1 second when you winning doesn't last long, because there's always someone you're breathing down your neck. You can just be the champion for so long, and then you always have to maintain that title. That I decided I was going to actually get joy from something else. Okay. And that's when I had to quit judo, but it took me a long time to get joy from other things. And I think that's whatever you do, is even like you say, judo, I think it's make sure that you enjoy doing it, that you have the passion for doing it. I think that's very important, because as a youngster, I learned I had such high levels of discipline that I did it even though I hated it. And for years I hated it, and it was part of my identity. But I was willing to pay the price, but the price was too high at some point. So I think if if I were to give you advice about the judo, I don't know if I want, if I can give you, without being on the mat with you and seeing what you do, but it's just doing something that you enjoy and with a passion. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, you have to enjoy it, don't you? When you stop enjoying it, although you can still get, as you said, to the top levels, it doesn't give you the same feeling anymore. But everyone's different. Some people need that. Some people don't need to love something. They just need to see results. And I suppose it just depends on your personality side. But you talked a bit about finding joy in something, and that's changed over time. So what is it you now find joy in? Is it in what you do day to day, or is it something else?
Okay, so now you see what I understood was that like pursuing my happiness, so to speak, pursuing what gives me joy. I don't do zero-sum games anymore. Okay, my joy, I think, like I said, part of evolution was from becoming someone who's selfish and into winning. What I find, and I think also philosophically speaking, the joy that lasts most is joy that when you manage, the joy of, I'm sorry about the cliche, the joy of giving, basically.
Yeah.
But it's about giving your best. It's doing, I think, the joy of following my calling. Okay, when I feel that I'm aligned with my calling, and with what my purpose is in life, and I do what I love, and I'm good at what I do, that gives me joy. So now, so I just do a quick recap. So if I went from being a selfish judo champion to a selfless military boot camp commander, I afterwards became a homeopath. So a homeopath is, you're a therapist. You cure people. It gives a lot of satisfaction, and it definitely does give me satisfaction. Gave me satisfaction, and still does give me satisfaction. I have, thank God, a thriving homeopathic clinic, and I treat lots of people. So that was like my next stage of evolution, was treating people and helping people using homeopathy, which is amazing because it's a whole philosophy, it's a whole way of life. And then the latest stage of my development, the way I see it, is becoming an extrasensory business consultant. Because the way most people would say that there's the business world, or we'd say the material world, and is disconnected from the spiritual world. And the way I see it, actually bringing the spiritual principles and the spiritual into the material world, for me, is what brings me the most satisfaction. Is when I give extrasensory business consultations to people, and I actually show them how you can do business and do business that's a win-win and not a zero-sum game. And actually that for me is making the world a better place. And that's what gives me joy and satisfaction. That's long lasting, because like I say, it's when I make the world a better place, the world becomes better, and it reflects back to me. So I think I think everyone should, if everyone follows their calling, ultimately that's what people feel, and everyone makes the world better in their own way.
Yeah, I think that's a common misconception, isn't it? That to be a successful businessman, you have to basically take things from people. But the best businesses actually, as you said, provide value, and there has to be some sort of give and take, because when people pay for something, it's a transfer of value, isn't it? It's a transfer of service, it's a transfer of product, whatever it's going to be. So if you can focus on giving value, giving service, the monetary side happens itself. Have you found that?
Yeah, exactly. That's what happens. And I think the monetary, it does happen by itself, but also some people have a very difficult time speaking about money. They feel uncomfortable asking for money or negotiating. And I think it's also a part of life. You need to know how to talk about these things and learn how to demand what you deserve and receive what you deserve. But it's all a matter of maintaining a good relationship and goodwill throughout the process. So if I look at life like this, basically like a gym for the soul,
Yeah.
where we're here to evolve and learn, and it doesn't really matter what you do. It's what matters is how you do it, and the consciousness that you come to do it, and the state of mind that you're in while you do it. So if you understand that the person in front of you he exists, but he also exists in order to help you grow, then you look at things differently. So the person in front of you, who seems to be giving you a hard time, is basically there to basically train you to become a better person and to learn how to deal with that certain pattern that he's presenting at the moment.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that we're in the gym and someone is spending too much time on the bench press, and they are neglecting the back exercises, or they're neglecting the bicep curls, or they're neglecting the legs. And this is a metaphor for life, is what you're saying. So how can people start moving around the equipment, and what is it that you feel that people miss out on in life? Is it the spiritual side that as you said, aligns with business as well? Or
I think I remember one time I was in this spiritual study class, and one of the women said, ask the teacher whether she can give out homework. And I remember telling her, don't worry, life will give you homework. So
Yeah.
you see that reality already, the good thing about reality, I think, is it always presents to us, what we need to work on. We don't have to, you don't have to look far. It will just come to your doorstep. The lesson is there. The lesson is there, when, if I've got two kids, so when my daughter starts having a temper tantrum, that's where my lesson is at the moment. I don't have to start looking far. It's at every moment we have a lesson to be learned, and it's just a matter of at the end of the day, it's a matter of perspective, the way you look at things. If you look at things as an opportunity to grow, as part of your spiritual training, then it's much easier also to accept them, and also to understand what's required of you at that very moment.
Absolutely. There's a Stoic phrase that says, if a man walks into a river, when he comes back out of the river, neither the man nor the river is the same. And that's exactly what each experience is. It's that river that we've gone through that, as you said, changes our perspective, then changes us as individuals, because you are a completely different person now. And I'm not, forgive me if I'm speaking on your behalf, but you're probably a very different person now than you were age 12 judo champion. Your perspective is different. Your thought process is different. Your what you focus on is different. What your priorities are is very different. Do you feel that you are in, or let's push this forward? Where do you feel that you need to develop? So if you're on this path now and you, as you said, get taught lessons, what lesson do you feel that you need to learn at this point?
Look, the way I see it, if I go back now just to explain the extrasensory business consultancy, I remember wanting to have, say, clairvoyant abilities from a very young age. I remember reading about it and trying to develop them, and it took a very, very, very long time to develop. And what I realize now is, Kabbalah, Jewish spirituality is called Kabbalah, and the basic premise, I'd say, is that they're lights and they're vessels. Okay, so the light of the infinity of God is always present, and we can't affect the light, but we can affect the vessel. Each one of us is a vessel, and the stronger and purer the vessel, the more light it can contain. So it's like, if I can think of an analogy, it's like if you take like a radio player. So there's, the radio frequency, the radio waves surrounding us, but it depends on if you have a radio player that's strong and it's set to the right frequency, you can hear, clearly that specific station that you choose to listen to. But you have to buy the radio and invest in it, etc. But you don't affect the radio waves. So the same thing is about, when think about lights and vessels. So the more we strengthen our vessel, meaning, the stronger and the building our own character and, living a certain life and maintaining a certain mindset, then that basically strengthens our vessel, and then we can have more light come through us. It's like channels of information. So we work on the infrastructure, and then whatever needs to come will come. So I'm focusing on the infrastructure. I don't know what necessarily will be the next step, but at this point, I just want to, I have the tools at my disposal, so to speak, are actually, within my family and within my close surroundings. That's personally, and then professionally as a homeopath and as a business consultant, to basically follow my calling. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, I'm a strong believer in spiritual laws as well. So in my book, I talk about the 50 spiritual laws, the law of attraction, karma, obviously the basic ones that people are aware of, but there are also other laws that people aren't aware of, as you said, the vibrational laws, etc. And there are actually quantum physics experiments that prove this now, that if you zoom in enough, it's not a table, it's vibrations. The double slits experiment, particle entanglement. So there is proof that a lot of these historic religions and artifacts and books show this stuff. You mentioned the Kabbalah there, and I was looking at this the other day. is it Sod or Sod, the like the fourth level of understanding of the Kabbalah?
Yeah, Sod, which is
Yeah,
basically
Sod.
translated as secret. That's the the simple translation of it.
So what does that entail? Because you mentioned Kabbalah thinking a minute ago. What does that entail, and does that incorporate into your homeopath and business consulting side of things?
Well, like Kabbalah speaks about the four levels of understanding. Like if you take a biblical text, there are four levels of understanding the biblical text. The first one, without going into it too much, is pshat, is simplistic. Just what you see is what you get. Then there's drash, which is where you go into more, into a deeper level. Remez and sod. Remez is like, if I translate it, it's called a clue or some symbol, and the sod is the deepest level. Now, it's very, sod is like, it's such an internal level that I don't know if you can even perceive it. We can perceive it with our limited understanding. But if you talk about the holy scripts like the Zohar, it speaks about the sod. It's like it's considered the pnimiut Torah, the inside, the deeper level of the Torah. And when you have an understanding of by the way, I wasn't born religious. It's over time as I learned more spiritually, and I learned more about homeopathy and about spirituality, etc. I understood the deeper meaning of living a religious life. It's not basically you wash your hands in the morning in a certain way because it's written that way. It's because that when you're asleep, it says it's like one part of 60 of death, and then what you would call tum'ah, impurities are left on your hands and your fingernails. And when you actually clean your hands in a certain way and say a specific blessing, that removes the impurities. And that understanding, for instance, that's an example of the internal side of the Torah, when you understand the deeper reason for why you do things. And most people, these deeper reasons used to be in the past only high scholars used to know, or Kabbalists used to know these deeper reasons, and now more and more people are understanding this. And for me, the more I understood the deeper reason for doing things, that's why I decided to become, I'd say, a more observant Jew and do what I do, because there's a reason behind things that I choose to do at the end of the day.
Well, I think that's a couple of things there that's really important. I think the four levels thing that you talked about is amazing, because even in our own life, we can see things in four levels. Something happens to us, we can say, "Oh, that's happened." But if we look deeper, what deeper meaning is there? As you said, what lessons are there to learn, etc., etc. So I think that's a really good way of looking at things, that we can look at stuff at increased levels. You also mentioned you've increased your spirituality journey, which is great, and religious journey. And do you think that comes down to consciousness, like your conscious awareness of what's happened in your life, how you feel, how to behave correctly? And as you said about vibrational states, does acting in a certain way, do you feel, puts you into a better vibrational state than going out murdering people as an extreme?
What I think is, going with what you said is very correct, because I think religion, Jewish religion, okay, I can talk about Jewish religion, when it's done properly and correctly, the whole point is getting you to a higher vibrational state, getting you to a purer state of mind. Again, it has to be done correctly, because religion has been misused and misinterpreted in the worst things have been done in the name of religion, any sort of religion. So it can be also very dangerous. But I think the Judaism, it's actually meant to bring you to a higher vibration. That's ultimately why I do what I do, in order to reach a higher consciousness and a higher vibration. And the higher consciousness and the higher vibration you have, you can make better choices, more informed choices. You know, you're more, it's like being, you know, in the zone, so to speak, you know, when things go smoothly and you're connected, and it's just a much, for me, it's a much better way of living. Even you know, I encounter hardships and they're difficult times, but I feel that there's always like a center where I can go back to, a place that I can return to. And I think that's very important.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that, like, we all know of those people who good things just keep happening to them. And we also know those people who bad things keep happening to them and they are unlucky and unfortunate. Do you think that comes down to their state of mind, their vibrational state, their consciousness?
I think it's a higher, I agree that, you see, what you describe now is something that we talk about a lot in homeopathy. People work in patterns. People have a pattern. It's like, you know, they have this frequency that they emit, and this frequency sort of creates things in their reality, and it keeps on. And usually people repeat the pattern. So you see people, these patterns will keep on repeating. Now, spiritual, if I look at it from a spiritual perspective, these patterns will keep on repeating in order to give this person a chance to break the pattern. You know, like if a woman was abused at a younger age and she keeps on finding herself in abusive relationships, it's like she's being put, you know, she keeps on getting the same lesson again and again in order to learn the lesson.
Okay.
Now, I know it's not easy to hear that, you know, that a woman who's been abused, it's also because of her makeup, but it's also got to do with her, the way I look at it, the way I see it, it's got to do also with her lesson, her journey, her soul. There's a reason why she was born to us. Each one of us is born to a certain family, and we have these different experiences in life. We've got, you know, karma. We have souls that we keep on meeting, and we keep on, you know, we have journeys to make and lessons to learn from each other. Now, as we work in patterns and we try to learn these lessons, what homeopathy does, it's very difficult from what I see. If you just work at it from a mindful point of view, you just try to resolve things with your mind, it's very difficult because you can't control your emotions. You can tell, like, if someone's afraid of a dog, you know, has a fear of dogs, you can tell him, you know, even when he's 30 and the dog is tied behind a fence, there's nothing you can explain to him that can really take that fear away. It's very difficult to break these patterns because they have emotional and subconscious roots.
Yeah.
So coming from, it's difficult. You can't overthink things, or you can't resolve things with your brain, nor can you resolve things, from my experience, by talking about them too much. Because the thing is, the more you focus on something, the bigger it grows. So if you keep on talking about all the things that bother you, it means that you keep on looking for the things that bother you. And, you know, the way perspective, I think the eye actually, the way we look at things nurtures them. So if I'm looking for bad things, that's what I find at the end of the day. You know, also you spoke about quantum physics. Quantum physics also shows that the eye actually affects what happens in reality. You know, you can affect the observer.
It's like what you focus on. It's like what you focus on, you see more of. They did an experiment actually where they asked, there was like a black team and a white team, or red and blue team, and they were throwing the ball to each other. And they asked the individuals to count how many times the balls passed between. So you're focused on the balls, and during this experiment, a gorilla walks through past everyone across the center of the stage or video that's being played. And they asked them, well, how many balls crossed over? And they said, 23, 24, 25, whatever the number was. And said, how many noticed the gorilla? Hardly anyone did, because they're so focused on these balls that they don't see the wider picture. If you have not said to them, focus on these balls and count the number, they probably would have seen the gorilla. So it is, as you said, what you focus on that's important. And then you also said a couple of things about, obviously, your soul and the lessons that you learn. Do you feel it's a case of you win or you learn from each experience?
Well, I just want to just finish the idea was I was saying. What that experiment is definitely shows how the way that you observe things affects your reality. And that's why I said that I find that talking about problems tends to not solve them, because you just give them more room. But if I'm what is effective, because I said up till now I focus on what isn't effective. So what can you actually do to break patterns? What I find is actually the best way to break patterns is homeopathy, and that's why I do it. Because in order to break a pattern, first of all, it's the homeopath's job to identify the pattern, so you don't have to worry about that. But in order to break a pattern, something has to happen in your subconscious level or on a higher spiritual level, and it's not something that necessarily you'll be aware of. That's what I see on my patients. They have a pattern, they take a homeopathic remedy, and something just changes, okay? Because something changed something within them, and then they don't repeat the pattern anymore. Or when the pattern represents itself, or the situation represents itself, because they changed their, the way they react to it, and the lesson's done. They've learned the lesson and it moves on. So I think homeopathy is one of the strongest tools, and I've experienced so many different forms of alternative medicine, from elective bee stings to to Chinese medicine, osteopathy, Feldenkrais, anything. I've tried frequency treatment, resonance, bioresonance. I think the fact that homeopathy basically perceives the entire individual and can give a remedy which is actually the spiritual essence of one of maybe 5,000 different substances, and it can make such a huge and deep change in the individual that you see changes also on a physical level, also on a mental level. But the most important thing is that people don't repeat the same patterns. Like someone can suddenly become promoted after 20 years that they haven't been, that they've been in the same position, or a woman can, finally decide to leave a relationship with a husband, or finally she has a good relationship with her husband after so many years, because something very deep changes, and that's got to do with breaking patterns. So basically, I think what homeopathy does. Yeah, sorry.
I was just going to say, what's the process that you undertake in order to help people change all of those things you've mentioned?
If I look at it from a homeopathic point of view, so I give them a homeopathic remedy. Now, how do you prescribe a homeopathic remedy? In order to prescribe, to give a good prescription, you want to hear the person's entire life story. Preferably, even if you have a chance to speak, if it's a child, you want to hear the mother. How was the birth? How was the pregnancy? Because patterns tend to repeat themselves. Like if you see that that things that the mother experienced during the pregnancy and during the birth, you will see that it's amazing how you see that in the child's life. If the mother, for instance, lost her parents during the pregnancy and she was very sad and grieving, you see that also it affects the child. You see that. Or you see that there was this woman that when she was pregnant, she used to crave ice, and she never craved ice before. And when the child was born, he used to crave ice. So it's amazing how much a fetus can affect the mother, and what a close relationship they have. So when you take homeopathy, we say we take the case. You hear the mother's story, you hear about the birth, you hear about the pregnancy, the birth. If it was a traumatic birth, obviously it does have its effect. And then you want to know about the family environment. Whether it's a happy family or whether the parents are having difficulties, because obviously that affects the child. Then you want to know about the character traits. Most people think that, especially when they talk about the children, oh, that's just his nature. He tends to be angry, or he's stingy, or he's, or he's needy. These are traits, but from my experience, they can change. If you give a good remedy, you see that a needy child becomes confident. A child that, his life pattern is that he's bullied everywhere he goes. You can change his nursery or you can change his school, but wherever he goes, he's bullied. It's because something in the resonance, that he puts out, something in his frequency, in the vibration, basically draws that kind of energy. And when he gets a good remedy, you see that also changes. So in homeopathy, you take into account also the character trait, the person's nature, and all their physical and mental symptoms. So the physical symptoms, it's not just a tummy, you can say my tummy is sore, he has tummy aches. You say he's got a tummy ache at 5 o'clock in the afternoon after he drinks smoke. That's we're going to very fine resolutions in order to see. And everything has a pattern. You see that the physical patterns and the mental patterns tend to, if you have a deeper understanding, you'll see that they're the same, they reflect each other.
So that's how you, from what you said, sort of find and create the diagnosis or prescription. But then as what would be like an example prescription or as you said, remedy that you would prescribe for that individual in order to help them change? And how long would you expect it to take to actually see results?
Well, I can give, I'm just trying to think of an example. I give you an example for a remedy. There's a remedy called Natmur. It's Natrum muriaticum. It's made of salt, common salt. And now, how do you make it? I'll start by homeopathy. How do you know what a remedy does, what a homeopathic remedy cures? Because homeopathy, one of the main principles of homeopathy is like cures like, meaning that a certain substance remedy that can create certain symptoms in a healthy individual will be able to cure those same symptoms in a sick individual. So, we all know that consuming too much salt leads to, retention of water, edema, and high blood levels, etc. It's not healthy to consume too much salt. However, as a homeopathic remedy, if someone came to me, I'd say it would be suitable to individuals which are, that salt has a power of absorbing things, right?
Yeah.
So it would be it's suitable for people who are very closed, very who repress maybe their feelings, people who are grieving. I remember reading a book where the author described a cow that was grieving for her for her calf, and she was licking salt. So people who are grieving, people who are suffering from grief, also that remedy is good for. People who are suffering from also things to do with basically the water balance and fluid balance of the body. So when you take into account the person's pattern, so you have a person, maybe a child who lost their parents, and since then he's drinking a lot of water, and he's also he suffers from incontinence during the night. Okay, and he's very introverted, and he doesn't express his grief. So you have this whole picture, which is all about retention and water, and it's a certain pattern that you see, and obviously this pattern is expressed in other symptoms. Also we also look at dreams in homeopathy. So, and then if you give this child that remedy and it's suitable, you see that the child opens up. Is more expressive. Things change with the fluid intake. So things change, and usually you ask how quickly things change. The healthier person is, you see the change faster. Like children, in babies, you see changes are, I remember, especially with dentition, people used to tell me how they used to just throw the remedy into the child's mouth, and within less than a minute. I remember also telling my husband, we used to give the remedy to my daughter. She was screaming in agony. I told him, less than 5 minutes, you'll see she calms down. And less than 5 minutes, she used to calm down. And there is no chemical reaction here, because homeopathy actually works on a different level. So you can see amazing results very quickly. However, that's the more dynamic a person is. If you're talking to about older people who've been taking lots of medication, and you have like diseases which have been there for longer times, then obviously changes take longer.
So we talked a bit about homeopathy rather, and also we talked about the people learn lessons for certain reasons, and we are born into families for certain reasons, etc. So what's your stance on determinism versus free will, or do you feel that there can be a crossover?
Ooh, that's a huge one.
For me, I think there is an element of determinism. We are certain seeds that grow into certain trees, but at each checkpoint, we have free will into how we act. Because for those people who die from heroin overdoses, I don't believe that was their determined path, but they took at each, as you said, lesson point, or at each life event, whatever it's going to be, they made the wrong choice, which then after 5, 10, 15, 20 choices, it then leads you down a different path. What's your view on that? And the reason I ask is because obviously you know a bit about people's history and how to cure remedies. You also know a lot about the Kabbalah and the type of thing. So I thought it would be a good question to ask you.
Yeah, that's an amazing question, and it's a question that I keep, that I meet at different levels, and every time I have a different understanding, hopefully a better understanding of it. But if I think basically you have the lessons, and you choose whether the lessons, like we said, are presented at your doorstep, and you can choose whether you want to learn them. And in Hebrew, there's a saying, it's called mitzvah goreret mitzvah ve'avera goreret avera, which means a mitzvah is I'd say, maybe if I were to just translate it in a very simplistic terms, good deeds lead to good deeds, and bad deeds lead to worse deeds. So I think the better choices you make, you expand your choices. The worse choices you make, you keep on constricting yourself, and you're more and more constricted, which in a way is an advantage. The constriction is also, so I think it's an inbuilt system, which is actually good for you, because when you're constricted, you have less choice and you can make less mistakes in a way. So it can be more difficult to make those mistakes, but you have no choice we spoke about inspiration or desperation. The worse choice you make, you become more and more desperate. So if you make good choice, you grow out of inspiration. And I'd say if you make worse choices, if you can actually call that, it's very simplistic to look at it that way, it forces you to grow out of desperation.
That makes sense, actually, to be fair. And yeah, I think you've got a similar view as that we do have a choice, freedom of choice, but there is a path as well that we are there to follow. And I think we can feel that internally, can't we? That this feels like the right way to go. And I have this sort of dichotomy where my heart says to do one thing, and I don't know really why it says to do that. There's no evidence as to why I should do that thing. Whereas my brain is based on logic and, I've done all the research, I've looked at every possible outcome, and I should be doing this. What's your thoughts on that as well, in terms of the brain versus, or the head versus the heart dilemma?
That's a really good point you raised now, because I think that it's very ideally you can sort of combine the two, your heart and your brain. So basically make an informed choice with what your passion is and what you love. But and I think the more you grow, the more clarity you have as to why. Sometimes you can think it's your heart, but it's not really your heart. It's more like some subconscious fear that's drawing you towards something. So it's very difficult to say, in many cases, why you feel that you want to do something, and that you're averse to doing something else, because sometimes actually you're afraid of doing something because it's like a doorway, and once you actually manage to grow above that initial fear, something great is going to happen. So it's very tricky. depending only on the way you feel, because some people say, I feel like eating a chocolate bar and staying in bed all day and watching TV. So that's the way I feel. I'm going to follow my heart. So I think I'd say, what I say, purifying the vessel, what I spoke about is knowing when it's your true heart or your higher soul talking through your heart and directing you towards the right path, or when it's, in Kabbalah they speak about there's the animal side, and of each person has an animal side and a higher side, a higher being or higher existence. So knowing when things come from your lower side or from your higher side, it's a question in itself, and that's about the purer the vessel is. It's easier to identify where things are coming from. So the brain has a very important job, I think, to realize, to differentiate and see. So I think you can't completely overlook either your heart or your brain, because, like I say, it's very difficult to know where things are coming from unless you're very trained.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the brain situation there. There is the reptile brain, isn't there? And then the higher brain, or the monkey brain, as sort of some people call it. Do you feel that your consciousness, etc., has led you into what you do now? So the business consulting as well, because we've talked a bit about the homeopath side. What does your insight lead to in the business consulting side as well?
I just want to regarding what you said, there is the brain, like there's the croc brain.
Yeah.
I heard someone describe it, and the higher brain. I think they are a reflection of what happens spiritually. Okay. So the physical, maybe they're the physical reflection of how things are, because we have our higher being is something that it's not quantifiable or measurable. And just going back to your question, I think when someone comes to me when I do the business consulting, so the way I understand it, or the way I do according to bioergonomy, which is basically a method. Bioergonomy is an extrasensory method which enables me to perceive and influence the subject that I'm focusing on. So when someone comes to me for business consulting, the first thing I check is that all their energy fields are intact. According to bioergonomy and other schools of thought, everything has an energy field. Every animal, and also bank accounts have energy fields, businesses, your sales department has an energy field, everything has an energy field. And if those energy fields are disrupted, that's when you start having problems with the business, or people become sick, they become ill, etc. So the first thing I do when I check that all the energy fields are intact, for different levels and different categories, and usually you find that the energy fields aren't intact, and that's what you can. And using bioergonomy, I can fix those energy fields. And also, lots of people have what you would call energetic leeches, which is interesting. It's like it's usually people that leech on that person's energy. Now, these people don't necessarily consciously leech on someone's energy, but they do. So even just making people aware that they have energetic leeches, it could be, one of their children, which they love very much, or their spouse, or their business partner, or clients, or whatever. So actually making people aware of the energy leeches and cleaning up that, I'd say that independence is something that you can do with bioergonomy. So once I see that all the energy fields are in check, then I start checking whether personal goals are aligned with business goals. Because what happens, you see lots of people, their goals aren't aligned. They have, also in homeopathy, disease usually starts when you send a mixed message to the universe, okay? It's like when the waves that you send out, they aren't coherent. On the one hand, I want to be very good at my job. On the other hand, I'm feeling guilty because my children are at home and I'm not a good mother. So I want to be at home. So I'm sending out an incoherent message to the universe. And and obviously when I send such a message, I won't get the results I want. So something has to change. Either I have to align my goals, or I have to change the way I go about getting my goals. But if things aren't this incoherency, so to speak, it can't last a long time.
Yeah.
Just so in nature, if things don't work, they just don't last. They don't survive.
What makes up a good energy field though? What makes up what makes up a good energy field? Like you said, that you go in and you look at the energy field. Is it numerology? Is it the people who work there? Is it the business name? What makes up this energy field that you talked about?
I think lots of things affect the energy fields, and I don't necessarily go into it. I would just check. I check the business. I see that it's got 100% energy fields, and if it doesn't, I clean it up. And if it doesn't work, just like a basic clean, I would say, okay, there's something that's affecting the business. And then I start looking at different options. So basically, I combine my experience with the extrasensory, with my extrasensory abilities, because when I start looking at the options, I derive the options from my experience. Is it the partnership? Is it the name? Is it the sales? Is it the clients? Either something wrong with the agreements? I use my experience as a basis, as a foundation, and then I use my extrasensory abilities to sort of hone in on the problem, and then we start discussing it, and we see. I do it with the client, and she's usually I work with women who are business owners of small businesses. So we'll talk about it, and we'll see, and things start coming up, and then we just go into wherever the path leads us. So I don't come with an agenda. I just want to see. I sort of, it's like a piece of string, and you start following it and pulling it, and then you can get to the root of the problem.
No, it makes sense that you don't necessarily look for something specifically, but you have an overarching view, and then you can make an assessment, because sometimes there's the macro and the micro, isn't there? Sometimes you look into the details, but sometimes you need to see the big picture, and you can see something's off without having to look at the individual details sometimes. Is that what you're referring to?
I'll give you an example. This woman turned to me and she said, listen, I've got this great business. Everything's great, but I don't know, our sales are down. We're not making money. Why aren't we succeeding? So I checked all the different aspects of the business, and everything was okay. And then what we realized was that she was making more money than her husband. And her husband was basically, her husband wasn't happy, consciously or subconsciously, that she was making more money than him. Okay, and his energy was stopping her from making money. So, and that's something that, it's not in the business books. This is more like the spiritual books. You have to know what you're dealing with. And normally most husbands feel uncomfortable not being the main breadwinners. So that's just the way it is. So we found a solution. We said, okay, we want the business to succeed. What we'll do is you make him feel part of it. That's what I told her. Make him feel part of the business and part of the success. Ask him for ideas, ask him for advice. And then when the business succeeds, he will feel that he's part of the success. It's also his business. He'll want the business to succeed. He won't see the business as a threat and as competition, because you made him part of the business. So and that's how we resolved the issue. Once the husband felt that he was part of the business, and the success of the business was also thanks to him, he had an interest that the business will succeed. And there wasn't any conflict there. He didn't have an internal conflict, like I want my wife to succeed, I want the business to succeed. However, my ego. So what we try to do is we try to resolve conflicts, and people have internal conflicts all the time, whether like for instance, mother versus Korean woman, and also external conflicts. So constantly trying to see how we can resolve conflicts for the higher good of all those involved. That's the key here, because we want to do things, we want to keep the win-win going, right? That's what we're talking about. So we want the husband to feel good about this. We want, like that's just in my example, there's no point in going to your husband saying, listen, you've got to, I make more money than you, find a way to deal with it. You want to basically create a harmonious environment, because that's the vessel that will contain the abundance.
Yeah, I don't know if you've read any of Florence Scovel Shinn's books. I mean, you probably haven't, because they're not sort of religious texts, but they're books that talk a lot about this spirituality side of things, and that it's all about how you're perceiving things and looking at things that can change, obviously, the dynamic. So as you said, maybe just a shift in her husband's viewpoint can change the whole situation. So is there any advice you've got for people that could do that in their own life to make changes or improve, or is it a case of needing someone to see the entire picture before making an assessment?
I think I had an understanding yesterday. I was speaking to this woman who owns a business in Tanzania, and I had one of the understandings I had while I was talking to her was that at the end of the day, you can, and this may not sound very spiritual, but to me it's very spiritual, because you can only rely on that. At the end of the day, you can only rely on a person's goodwill for so long. People have to feel that they're gaining from a relationship, whether it's a business relationship or a personal relationship. People sometimes have this idea of some ideological idea how people they expect other people to do things out of their goodwill. Whether it's employees, they expect them to give 200% just because the business, or even their partners. And it doesn't work. You have to you have to make sure that people are always getting value from their relationship with you, whether it doesn't have to be monetary value. I think even the research showed that people would rather stay in a job where they feel respected, and people where their abilities are commended, than at the higher paying jobs where they feel that they're not getting that they're not being acknowledged. What they do isn't acknowledged as much as they feel they deserve. So like I say, the value can be acknowledgement. Value can be just being there and showing the person that you actually see them, you see their efforts, you see what they're doing, you see their difficulties. People value that at least as much as money. Let me put it that way. Depends on on the situation they're at. So that's one thing I think is very important, is don't rely on people's goodwill for a very long time, because it won't last.
Yeah, no, as you said, everyone's got we talked about selfish being right at the start. Everyone has got an inherent selfishness, haven't they? That they want to see some sort of benefit. And even if it's, as you said, not monetary, it's just gratitude for what they've done.
Exactly. And it's not, in the Kabbalistically, Kabbalah has everything or very organized in the way you look at things. So they say, like the minimum you need is something that, you need. Basically, you need a minimum. There's a minimum that you need to maintain yourself, and you have a duty to maintain your personal entity, and that's not. There's nothing wrong with that. It's nothing to commend you about, and it's nothing to reproach you about. There's a basic minimum that you need as a person, whether it's to maintain your physical being, food, water, etc., and personal space, and also the minimum you need as far as being acknowledged and being seen. So I think, starting out back to the beginning of our conversation, being an individual athlete, you learn how to look after number one. And once you know how to look after number one, you've mastered that, you have to move on to the next level. which is looking after the people around you. But first, before you start looking after everyone around you, you have to know how to look after number one.
Yeah. Well, you can't look after others unless you are self-sufficient anyway.
Exactly.
Those who can look after everyone else is because they are so competent that they've built up a surplus that allows them to then take care of family and the wider community, etc. So yeah,
Exactly.
definitely comes back to working on yourself, improving your consciousness, improving your skill set, and providing more value for others. Is there anything that before we talk about where people can find you, is there anything that you want to talk about or mention that we haven't maybe covered?
It's just what you described now was the healthy state of taking care of others. But there is the unhealthy state of taking care of others, and I think it's as a woman and a mother, it's something that I think women tend to fall more into that pattern, is when you take care of everyone else and you don't take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And when that happens, you naturally become very bitter. You have this victim mindset and you become very bitter and very sour. And that's a very dangerous place to be in, although very natural and happens a lot and often. It's a very dangerous place to be in as a woman and as anyone, and for anyone around you. It's also not. So I think every woman and mother has found herself in that position. So being able to take care of other people, like you said, is very important from a healthy place where you've taken care of yourself. But there's always like I said, the system, like we spoke about, systems that just won't last forever and can't last. I don't know forever, but can't last for long, is when you're taking care of everyone and not taking care of yourself.
So where can people find you then if they wanted to reach out for the homeopathic stuff or the business consulting, for example?
Well, I've got my website. It's bio4biz, bio4biz.com, and you can always leave a message. I've got my LinkedIn, so anyone's welcome to contact me there, and I'd be happy to see how I can help.
Yeah, well, we'll leave the notes in obviously the comment section, etc. But if you've not got anything else to add, thank you very much for being a guest. It's been a great conversation. Covered a lot of different areas from judo to Kabbalah to your specific specialisms as well. So yeah, thanks very much for being a guest. It's been a great show.
And thank you, Jivan. It was a real pleasure to speak with you, and it's amazing how much you know about so many different fields, and it's a real pleasure to talk to someone about spiritual things, and also about the material world, which is I think that combination is so important. And I think the consciousness of humanity, I think the right direction, not on myself, is to combine the two. The more people understand that the material world is basically nurtured by the spiritual, I think the world will be a better place.
Absolutely. But thanks again, and yeah, we'll catch up soon.
Thank you.
Cheers.